Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about lazy programmers. So let's get into it. Well, the actual question here is basically I heard that it's that software developers that some software developers do about 1 hour of work and then they sit and surf the web the rest of the day. Is this true? Well, yes, it is. Just as it's true that some homeless people have a lot of are just homeless by choice, but they actually have money, and it's also true that some doctors they just do it for the prestige. They don't care about people. They just want the benefits of being a doctor, and it's true that some construction workers actually are truly nice, and some construction workers are sexist or whatever, like the classical picture that you have of people. And just as it's true that some programmers are really good at math. I mean, this is not, I mean, of course, this is true for some people, and it's true for a lot of people. I mean, I know for a fact that there are tons and tons of professions where there are people who can spend most of the day just playing solitaire. If you don't believe me, go to a fairly unfrequented like store. I've seen this phone people play solitaire while there is no one in the store. The same thing goes for software developers. It's not uncommon, and it means if this is the sort of thing that happens, you have basically gotten to this magical point, which I've talked about a few times, where you in the company you have neglected good office cultures and a strategy for creating the sensation of ownership within your software developers. In other words, your software developers have gotten to this point where you are now not able to get them to personally invest in the company anymore. And at the same time, they see the problem here is that the software developers who do this sort of thing, they would not be able to do this sort of thing if they, for the first part, the planning actually was happening correctly, that they actually had work to do that needed to be shipped. Because if there was work at all times that they needed to address, which was measured and properly managed and so forth, then it would start to be very weird if somebody worked in this way, because you can't produce much meaning. Like there's no way for you to consistently keep up appearances by working one day like 1 hour a day as a software developer. You will not be able to produce anything meaningful, or rather the stuff that you do is usually bigger than that, or rather that depends on the company, of course, which is the thing I'm trying to say here. If the work that you need to do stands in proportion to the needs of the company, then you should be occupied for most of the day, every single day. If that's not happening, then you have a lot of slack time. I used to work in a company where this was actually the case, where the proportion of work that I needed to do and the tasks that I needed, I mean, the company needed somebody to do this, but the amount of work wasn't high enough to keep me occupied 100% of the time. And sometimes this is the case. And for some companies, especially in large companies, this is very, very common. And if you have this problem, you have a bit of an issue, because basically the thing that you want here is that, I mean, there's always something to do. If you can't occupy a developer, there's always something that they can improve, or they can have a look at, or process improvement, stuff like that they could do. But if they're not doing that, if they instead sit and surf the web or do something else, you either hired somebody who isn't all that interested, or even worse, or more likely, you've hired somebody, you have created a situation where the developer doesn't care anymore. They don't care about, they're not invested in the project. And if they're not invested in the project, they're not going to go the extra mile. They're not going to actively seek out work. They're like, as I said, it's no different from a person who's just doing the thing for a job, or a cleaner or anything like that, who isn't like, they're not there to prove themselves. They're not there to do what's best for the company. They're there to get a paycheck. And this is not the problem with the developer, I would argue. This is there's no, I mean, this is the traditional way that the industry works. most people don't enjoy their job enough to go the extra mile for the company, and that is I mean, what can you do? Well, in software development, the way to solve this is to get people to take ownership of the project, to really feel invested. But unless the company is willing to make these types of investments themselves and actually go for that sort of thing, this is the inevitable situation. I will say that it's not that common to have someone, I mean, spending an hour, and then, like, I don't think that these are the exact numbers, of course, but I mean, of course it happens. I know for a fact that it happens. And it's a very, it's a kind of sad situation, I would say. But I would also argue that it's no more sad than having a store clerk who just plays solitaire or checks Facebook much of the day because the store is very unpopular. If this sort of thing happens consistently, it's just a signature, or it's an outcome of a bigger problem, I would say. So what I want you to take away from this is that there are plenty of developers who spend quite a lot, not that many hours a day, solving coding related problems because the workload isn't actually high enough. If it was high enough and they under-delivered, they would get fired at some point, for sure. It's very hard to hide how much work you actually do in software development, unless you have only people, like you're like the only developer, and where everybody, literally everybody does it, and for some reason the people who are setting expectations on you have no idea how long things actually take. But as I said, it's an outcome of a bigger problem where you, number one, don't have the necessary workload for the developer, and you also don't have an office culture or employees who want to take ownership and go the extra mile for the company. And that basically means that they become these passive people who just literally does the thing that you tell them to do, and then they don't give a fuck anymore. And if you get to that point, that's not the employee. The employee, well, they might be the issue, but it's a shared responsibility to have this office culture and the sort of people within the company who are willing to actually go out and do something when they're not being told to do something. And unfortunately, this is true for most of the industry. Have a great day.